Michelle Marie McGrath.
Welcome to Unclassified Woman, and today I'm talking to Catriona Pollard. Catriona is the founder and director of CP Communications, one of Australia's most respected and innovative PR and social media agencies. Her transformation to an international speaker, popular media commentator, and leader of a highly successful PR and social media agency has been an incredible journey which she openly shares through her writing and speaking. Her book, From Unknown to Expert, How to Use Clever PR and Social Media to Become a Recognised Expert, is a comprehensive step-by-step program to learn how to become an expert and thought leader. Catriona's step-by-step Unknown to Expert 5-star system has been used by thousands of people to become highly paid and sought-after experts and thought leaders. She's passionate about social media, public relations, business, and bringing all of these together to create real financial success for entrepreneurs and organisations. Catriona shares her personal insights on her popular blog, catrionapollard.com. Outside of business hours, she's a practicing artist and creates sculptures from organic material at theartofweaving.com.au. And I hope you enjoy this conversation whereby Catriona shared how she had really desired to become a mother and have children, but it obviously just wasn't meant to be. And so it was great to have a very honest conversation about what can be such an incredibly emotionally charged topic for all women. Enjoy.
It's so great to have you here today.
Hi, Michelle. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation. Every woman always adds something so valuable from their own experiences to this. And so would you mind sharing with us a bit about your background and whether you've not had a child due to personal choice or through circumstances?
For me, it was certainly circumstances. I absolutely wanted to be a mother and to have children, but, you know, right relationships at the wrong time and the wrong relationships at the right time. It's just kind of happened that way.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the things that we often face, isn't it? And I'm hearing this more and more now of this. Some people call it social infertility or circumstantial infertility, which, you know, they're not very nice phrases, really.
Yeah.
Is it? It's not that nice, but it's just that case of often when people have been very open to that during that fertility window, they've either not been with somebody that they'd want to have a child with, they've not felt like it's a suitable relationship, or they've been single at that time and they've not wanted to embark upon that on their own.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and I think living in Sydney too, I mean, I don't know about regional centres or other cities and so on. I know living in Sydney, and it's pretty difficult to actually meet people that you'd want to have a relationship with, let alone have a child with.
Yeah.
And I think too, like, it's just I feel like there's a longer periods of being single, and the older you get, the more discerning you are as well. And it's just kind of really is down to circumstance, and suddenly you find yourself in this position that you never dreamed. Well, for me, I never dreamed of being in this position. Yeah. My entire life I was going to be a mother. I always imagined myself being maybe not necessarily a wife, but certainly in a relationship and being a mother.
Yeah, and so has it been something now that you've completely come to terms with? Have you been through any kind of grieving period? Are you at a point in your life where you think, okay, that's not going to happen for me at all now, or, you know, is it still a possibility?
It's really, I mean, that's why I decided to have a chat with you about this, because I went through a really, really deep grieving process, because as I said, I never imagined my life without a child, never. And so when I came to the realization that even, oh my gosh, possibly my life is going to not have a child in it. Like, I couldn't even comprehend that that's what my life would be. Like, it didn't even seem like it even could be. How could somebody live a life without having a child? Did you know what I mean? That's how much I wanted to be a mother.
Yeah.
And I went through, I think it was probably about 6 or 7 years of grieving. And it was absolutely grief. And I was having a conversation with a friend of mine. Like, most of my friends are women that don't have children, because it is pretty difficult to maintain close friendships with women who have young children and so on, because they go off and, they have different things that they do on the weekends and so on. But I was speaking to a friend of mine, and she actually, when I was talking to her about it, she actually said, it's actually a type of grief. And and that was when I went, that's exactly what it is. It's grieving for a life that you're not going to have, that you imagined yourself to have. And I really don't think that enough women talk about it. And I don't think society acknowledges what is going on for so many women when they're grieving for this child that they really wanted to have but never had.
It's so true, and it's very natural. It's very much tied in with our identity, isn't it, and how we're conditioned. And we are conditioned through our society to believe that, being a mother should be a very central part of that experience. And so if that's something then that you've really wanted, of course, that's completely natural that you would go through that. And I've heard that many times, it's very normal. And even women who had thought they probably didn't want a child, often they still go through a grieving process in just letting go of the idea of the concept of motherhood, whether it's been something that they were really yearning for, or whether it's just something that they just assumed would happen, or to them at some point. And then often life takes us down a different path.
It does, absolutely, it does. Yes.
So how did you sort of navigate that process, Catriona? Were there any things in particular that really helped you when you were going through that grief? Because obviously that's something so many people go through.
Yeah, in hindsight now, I think that I really should have sought counselling, or somebody who actually I could express what was going on with me with. But I sort of didn't, because I just kind of, it was a gradual process, really. And there was a moment in time in my early 40s where I just had this clarity, and I think I was probably coming out of the grieving process then, where I realized that my life was a blank slate, like it was a blank canvas.
Yeah.
And so I thought, okay, so my life isn't going to involve being a mother. What is my life now? What can I have it? So I flipped it from this how am I going to live my life without being a mother, to, okay, so what's the positives of this? What is it that what is it that I can do in my life now? And I think that is an amazing bonus of not being a mother, because we actually now can completely determine what our lives are going to be, who we are, how we want to be in the world, what are some of the activities that are going to make us happy, how are we are we going to develop year in, year out? Do you know what? It was a completely blank canvas. And so that's when I really started thinking about, doing a different thing in my business, building my business in a different way, and doing a lot more public speaking and a lot more personal development work, and really getting involved in art and creativity. So I use that, that period of grief and that negative part of my life, and flipped it and just kind of thought, okay, so what is it that I want to do?
Absolutely. And it's so true, because if you know that that's not going to be part of your experience moving forward, you've potentially got 20, 30, 40 years where you've got that additional energy and resources to really focus your time and energy on something that, could be incredibly meaningful and purposeful for you. And like you say, to channel that energy into other creative expression.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly right. And I do think that, we have to go through that period of grief to be able to get to that point. It's kind of like any of those experiences in life, that sense of loss.
Yeah.
And then you make a determination about how you use that loss in your life. Do you keep on sitting in the negative? Do you keep on sitting in the loss? Or do you actually use that to propel yourself forward in ways that you never even imagined?
Absolutely. And it can open up a whole new life for you. I've spoken to some women who, like yourself, had really always wanted that. And then through the process that they've gone through, it's opened up whole new careers for them, all sorts of different events happening in their life that they just would not have experienced otherwise if they'd been focused on a young family. And so we really just never know. So it really is how we respond to these events in our lives and how we process that. And our approach and our belief system really informs that so much, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And the thing is just nobody talks about this.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like in the media, it's all, like women in careers, women in fashion, beauty, all of that kind of stuff. There's so many, parenting vlogs, and there's just not exactly. Yeah. It's just fascinating. And I think that there's this concept that, they're single, they have no children, so therefore they can do anything in their lives. They've got this a huge amount of freedom. They're just like everyday people kind of thing. And I mean, it's kind of not like that.
No, because often the assumption is with that, and I've experienced this myself with a couple of friends, that, clearly you've obviously got no responsibilities, no concerns, no worries, no financial worries either, because obviously you've got this massive amount of disposable income, clearly, if you're not spending it on your children. And so there really is this perception often. And, I've had a few interesting conversations with a friend of mine in particular. She's got 2 young children, and she always comes out with these comments like, well, I don't have the luxury of that time, or, well, I don't have that choice, or I don't have that. And I had to say to her, listen, yes, there has been a degree of choice in that as well, but things are never that black and white. And I know so many mums with children who are also running businesses and doing all sorts of things. So it just depends on what is your priority at a certain time and how you spend your time really, and how you focus that on the things that are really important to you. And of course, it's not easy trying to juggle that with a family as well, but then you're automatically assuming that if people have not got children, they've got no other responsibilities, and that's not the case either.
It's absolutely not the case. And I think also too is that if you're single, then you're living on a single income as well.
Yeah.
Which, in Sydney is not particularly easy when you've got a mortgage and so on. And if you're running a business, then the responsibility of running a business and ensuring that there's enough money to pay staff every month and, all of that kind of stuff, massive responsibility. A friend of mine has just separated from her partner of 30 years, her husband of 30 years, and her kids are grown up. But she actually made a comment to me of she didn't realise how hard it was to be single, and she doesn't have to look after the kids now because they're grown up and they're financially responsible for themselves. But she just never realised how hard it was to manage it all and make all of the decisions on your own as well. So, you cannot make these blanket statements.
No.
That mothers find it more difficult than single people, and single people have all of this free time, or, as single as in, not mothers or people who aren't parents.
Yeah, and I mean, I've known, I've had friends who have been single for some time, and then often what seems to happen is amongst other family members, they often seem to be the person who ends up doing a lot of caretaking for parents or other relatives, a lot of running around for other, family members, because it's just assumed almost that, well, you've obviously got more time than me because I've got the kids to manage.
Yeah.
And so often as a default, they're doing all these additional duties. And then as well, I hear women comment on often if they're at work, they're often the ones that end up staying late because their colleagues have got to leave to pick up the kids from school, which obviously they've got to. So I think it's just really about a bit more tolerance and compassion on both sides of realising, look, it doesn't mean that your life's necessarily easier, in inverted commas, it's just different.
Yeah, absolutely it is. And I obviously, a massive believer in parental leave and so on. But I do, as somebody who's never going to have access to parental leave, I do wonder, well, what is it that I'm going to have if I want to go and do some study, or if I want to go in and do some personal development and so on. You don't have the ability to do that. Yeah. So I definitely think that there needs to be conversations about this, because there's so many women who are in situations now where they're never going to have maternity leave, they're never going to have paternity leave, they're never going to have any of that kind of stuff. And if they are the ones that are sitting back at work and doing the extra hours because they don't have the reason to go and pick up kids, then, there does need to be conversations about this.
Absolutely. And I think, look, recently we're starting to see the emergence of a bit more talk about that, but I think there's still a very long way to go, and we are living in a pronatal society, so it's just everything is conditioned towards being married and having children. We can see that completely. So you can feel like you're a bit of an alien if you're not fitting into that at times. And like you, I was married very young, and then I split up from my ex-husband, and I was single for about 8 years, actually. It was a steep learning curve in a lot of ways, and like yourself, it really is kind of an opportunity for a lot of personal development and, a lot of increased self-awareness around things.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing for me too is that, during this period of grief for me, my older sister, who was never going to have children, had a child. So it kind of, added complexity to the situation for me.
Yeah.
But what I have done in that situation is that I get to be an auntie.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I have really purposefully done is build and have a really amazing relationship with my young nephew, whose first day is school today.
Oh.
So do you know what I mean? So there's other opportunities for you to be able to have relationships with children.
Absolutely.
It's just not necessarily motherhood. And it was, I want to recount an experience that I had, because I'm asked if I have children. Some days it's virtually every day.
I know.
Because obviously I'm out and about a lot, and I, do lots of speaking, and I meet lots of people. And I really do think that it kind of used to really piss me off, actually. It depends on where I'm at that day.
Yeah.
But whether it's, the first question is, do you have children? And I now realize what it is because the majority of people have children, and so it's a common ground for them.
Yes.
So if they just say, do you have children, then the other person says yes, then it's a conversation starter. So when you're networking, it's a conversation starter. And I really would urge people to question that conversation starter, because what happens is when you say no, and there's sometimes I just say no, and then it ends the conversation straight away. So you're not going to build a relationship or a rapport with that person in that case. Sometimes I say, but I'm an auntie. It really depends on the situation. But I do think that one of the things that people need to think about is how they actually build rapport with people in social situations and business situations, that relates back to that natal society and the marital society that we live in as well.
So true, because it's not small conversation. This is actually a really big topic. It's not chit chat.
But I guess for them it is chit chat, because it's just who they are. It's part of how they define themselves. Yeah. But when you ask that person that question to a person who doesn't have children, depending on where they are in that grief cycle, or where they are in terms of making decisions around that, it actually is a really, really big question.
Yeah.
And it can bring a whole bunch of stuff up as well.
Huge.
I was presenting once to a group of very senior CEOs and leaders, and I was I was talking to them about social media and how leaders. One of my topics is how leaders can use social media more effectively. And somebody put their hand up. A man put his hand up, and I said, "Oh yes, so yeah, sure. What's your question?" And he said, and I'm absolutely not kidding you. He said, "Do you have children?" That was his question to me in front. I was on stage in front of, this group of people, this group of leaders. And I said, no, why? And he said, well, that's the only reason you have time to do social media is because you don't have children.
Wow.
And I kept on going because I thought, you're not going to stop me from doing my present here. And then at the end, I was so livid by then, I absolutely I shut him down big time because it was so extraordinarily inappropriate. But that's
so
absolutely how people think.
Yeah.
It's absolutely how people think.
Yeah, and look, maybe that was reflective of his background and age and, his personal situation. It sounds like he was quite traditional and old-fashioned.
Yeah. And I mean, he was struggling with social media, and so he felt that he was using children and lack of time as an excuse to not to do it. So, but it's just very interesting that even in the most public of places, people think that they have the permission to ask if you have children.
Absolutely. And we really do need to change the conversation around that. I wrote a post last week that was about how to respond to that question, why don't you have a kid? And there's been kind of quite a bit of joking in the media in the last few weeks because Ellen DeGeneres, she often talks quite openly about it, about how they're constantly asked, when are you going to have a kid? When are you going to have a kid? So in the end, they've actually bought a puppy and they've called the puppy Kid. So now when they're asked, they can say, we've got one. So that was her response to that, which I thought was brilliant. And then
it's a very cute puppy too.
Yeah. So it's just that thing of, really
absolutely.
asking people to kind of question your motivation. Why are you asking that? Are you really ready for a very honest response?
Yes.
And you've got no
absolutely.
idea where that woman's at or what her personal situation is. She could have just had a miscarriage. You don't know.
Yes, absolutely. So I just do think that it's worth having conversations around, is that a social chit chat question?
Yeah.
I would probably say no, it's not, unless you absolutely know that other people have children. And I understand that people do it because, you try and find common ground with other people.
Yeah, they're just trying to connect.
Yeah. The weather or
exactly.
It's probably a safer topic.
Totally, because you just don't know what kind of worms you're opening up. You really don't. So I always let other people volunteer that kind of information. If they want to talk about, their children or whatever, that's fine. But I would never ask somebody.
No, absolutely not.
And so obviously that is one way of expressing ourselves, our creative energy, our feminine energy. And I know that, like you said, you've been doing a lot of artwork and different forms of that recently. And obviously through your writing and speaking, you're expressing yourself in that way. So what are some of the other ways that you really enjoy expressing your creative force?
Yeah, it's really it's a really interesting question, because when I was going through at the tail end of that process of going, well, I have a blank canvas. What is my life? What I want my life to be. At that point in time, I realized that I wanted to achieve something that I never thought that I could.
Brilliant.
And so, and that was public speaking. So I used to absolutely, even way back at school, I refused to be school captain because I refused to get up and speak. Do you know what I mean? And right up until my late 30s, I refused to do things that involved public speaking. And so as a part of that process of going, okay, I want to do something that I really didn't think that I could ever possibly do, is that I started learning how to do public speaking, and I started doing a whole process of overcoming the fear of speaking in public. And that really enabled me to get a really strong sense of myself and really strong sense of accomplishment and achievement, because it set a different path for me that I never imagined myself being able to take.
So empowering.
It was extraordinarily empowering experience. And that was right around that time. And so as a result of that, I now get to speak, all over the world and Australia and stuff as a result of that. And I absolutely love it. I love getting up and speaking and sharing my experiences with people. It's a really empowering way of telling my stories and changing the world around me in some way that I possibly can. So I think that that's a really a point really worth thinking about, is if you can't, what is it that that you want to achieve that you'd never thought that you could possibly achieve, and take that on. And so the other things too was that I really wanted to write a book. And so I wrote a book. And I decided to set up another business, which is from unknown to expert, where I teach people how to move from being unknown to be a recognized expert, which is what I've done and what I do for people within my consulting business.
Brilliant.
And another part of what I decided I really wanted to do was really connect with my creativity. And I always had this unspoken dream of being an artist, and it was never spoken about. It was always kind of in the back of my mind. I never did art at school. I never did art at university. But during that period, like it was around when I was 40, I decided that I wanted to explore some type of craft or art. And so I booked into this week-long basketry course using native plants. And I absolutely loved it. And so I do that. It's a very, very core part of my life now. And I just had a a solo exhibition, and I've been, Emerging Artist of the Year, and a finalist as Emerging Artist of the Year, and been a whole bunch of exhibitions and so on as a part of this sculpture that I do using plant material. Beautiful. Which is really, really important part of expressing and telling my stories through art as well.
So it sounds like so much of your life and expression is around story sharing.
Yeah.
In one way or another.
Yeah, absolutely. And I personally find it really important to be able to be honest and tell stories. I really feel like we're in a society where, we look at Facebook and just think that everybody's life is amazing, and it's just this false and we compare ourselves to other people so readily now. And just go, well, their business is better than mine, and look on Facebook, they're here and they're there, and so on. And that's why I think it's really important that we actually talk about what it is to live a life that we probably we didn't plan for, or a life that doesn't have children when we thought we would have children, and how as women we have come to terms with that and then turn that into a positive.
Absolutely, because as we know, it's not the role of every woman to be a mother, even if that is something that you really want. Sometimes it's just not possible. And so then it is how we come to terms with that and then transform that into something else that's equally meaningful. And it sounds like you're really doing that, which is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. We have this life, and I don't think it's sitting on the couch and just wishing it away. I really do think that it's actually standing up and being heard and telling our stories. And for me, it's being able to influence other people's lives through my experiences and the things that I've learned along the way.
Absolutely. And so really you're living the benefits of not having had a child in this way and through these other experiences that you've had, and having, focusing on these pursuits that you may not have done otherwise.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's, I guess it's not to say that if I was a mother, I wouldn't have done all of these things. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I do know that what it is that it's living life consciously.
Yes.
It's actually like feeling the pain and feeling the sadness and feeling the disappointment and not trying to dismiss it and not trying to just run through life just hiding all of that, but actually like being present and feeling it, and then deciding what you're going to do with it. And there might be some days that you just go, you know what, I don't want to do anything. I'm just going to watch Netflix all day.
Yes.
But ultimately it is about knowing that your life is what you make it, and that there's so many people in this world that don't have the chance to be able to do that, and I do. So I'm definitely trying to make my canvas a beautiful canvas.
Yeah. Oh, well, beautiful. Thank you so much for your time, Catriona. And can you share with us where we can find you and your work online?
Yeah. So I actually write weekly inspiration stories about my life or the things that I see, and you can sign up to that at unknowntoexpert.com. And I've got a book and I've got a number of products there that relate to PR and social media. And if you're interested in my artwork is theartofweaving.com.au.
Oh, beautiful. And I'll include those links in the blog post with this audio as well. So thank you so much to your time. Really interesting to talk to you.
Thank you, Michelle, and thanks for, providing a platform for women like us to be able to tell our stories.
Oh, no, I love it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Unclassified Woman. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe. For information on events and services, connect with Michelle at michellemariemcgrath.com.